Hiya! Welcome to this, my 80th episode of VideoFuzzy. I'm your host, Terry J. Aman, sifting my basket of media memories, and in this installment, titled F is for Fiasco, we'll get to that, but first, comments on recordings that turned up from 2005, including Blind Justice and Close to Home. I watched a whole bunch of movies and another installment of By the Numbers. Welcome to the show!
He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy.
First and foremost, congratulations to longtime friend and friend of the podcast, Jesse Zimmerman, and his marriage to Michelle. Absolutely beautiful ceremony over Valentine's Day weekend. It's just all the absolute best. May love surround your hearts and happiness.
Friday Night Feature.
Running into 2005 era episodes of Missing and Blind Justice recently was exciting because it was a departure from all of the 2009 era shows I've been dutifully cataloging for months now, bringing back into view shows I'd largely forgotten. Hustle, Prison Break, The Nine, that takes me back. Really want to look at that one again sometime. I got more Showbiz Show. I got Carlos Mencia in character as a Hindu convenience store owner-operator swung wide at a broad swath of humanity, and the Comedy Central roast of Pamela Anderson. Oh, wow. There's also been a bit of vindication for the guy who made these recordings. Case in point, this set I encountered a few episodes of the CBS legal drama Close to Home, which I've ragged on mercilessly at other points of this production. Ludicrous and only watching it because of Christian Kane, etc., etc. Check out episode 2 around the 14-minute mark and get more involved in episode 30 ahead of the 15-minute mark if you want a refresher. Some were better than others, of course. One especially ripped from the headlines first season entry I found on discs 1259 and 1260, delicately titled Suburban Prostitution, focused on Kristen Bauer as Shannon Cook, a suburban housewife who turned tricks during the day while her family was at work and school. Her neighbor filed a complaint about this endless parade of men he videotaped streaming in and out of her home, whom she greeted at the door wearing lingerie. Jennifer Finnegan as beautiful blonde prosecutor, wife and new mother Annabeth Chase was unmoved. She didn't want to pursue it. Even with Gladys Kravitz next door, it was going to be a rough case to make. They had to catch Shannon in the act of receiving money for sex, and no money was ever seen changing hands. At worst, all they had was a neighborhood scandal, and from what I was seeing, some parking issues. Oh, were you next?
I'm a little early.
No, you go ahead.
She's out of Mr. Cases, into Mr. Parkinson's. She's a couple lengths ahead of Mrs. Johnson, who's still not out of Mr. Cases. Mrs. Brown, Mrs. Atkins, Mrs. Parkinson, Mrs. Warner, and Mrs. Rock, all still Mr. Phillipses. And at the line, it's Mrs. Casey, who's got it by a short head from Mrs. Penguin in second place, Mrs. Parkinson in third, Mrs. Rudd, Mrs. Collier, Mrs. Warner, and there's Mrs. Griffiths, who's remained unswapped.
Thank you, Vicar. That was a little Python from Disc 838. John Carroll Lynch, as her boss, D.A. Steve Sharp, asserted that if they don't prosecute the small cases, they turn into big cases, a la the broken window theory of law enforcement. So Annabeth approached Shannon to figure out what was going on with her. Another soccer mom had told her about this great new work-from-home opportunity. She'd introduced Shannon to her online madam named Terry Schaefer, played by Judith Hogue. Terry accepted payment through a site called RaunchyMamas.com, a modeling service. She sent all John's soccer moms, right to their home addresses based on guys clicking their photos on a website that anyone in the world could click to, look at, and rate them, and didn't sound like they had a lot to say over who might show up or come back later for more, maybe bring a friend, invite family dinner perhaps. So, how do you know Shannon? That sounds workable. Then once a week it gave her pay at a book club. When he heard this, the DA said, "My wife's in a book club." Calm down, Tammy Faye. It was 2005. Oprah Winfrey. Everyone's book was in a wine club. They sent Shannon in with a hidden camera and got enough probable cause for a warrant. Unfortunately, with the delay while Judge the N-silent Hosendijk, acknowledged golden thread through this collection, Patricia Belcher as Judge Riker in this one. The delay while she ruled on whether the computer they seized via warrant also included access to the information saved to the machine. Seriously? The neighbor, I guess, got tired of waiting for Shannon to be pulled from her home and burned in a bonfire in the front lawn like a witch, and sent a copy of his peeping Tomery to the local media, who, seriously, showed up outside a private home hurling questions at her, identifying her as a prostitute on the air ahead of jury selection. She's a private citizen. She's cooperating with local law enforcement. I'm trying to understand how the news operation didn't get sued for obstruction from one side and jury tampering from the other. But when the TV cameras show up, her husband grabs the kids and storms out, leaving Shannon shook so bad she commits suicide. Well, at this point, the case becomes something more than the Hollywood Madam investigative reports on Heidi Fleiss, or, for that matter, Sharon Lawrence's Honey Mama plotline on Desperate Housewives the season before. The suicide was bad enough, but the case took a turn when James Eckhouse's Annabeth's in-house computer tech, Matt Duretsky, installs a virus to destroy evidence on Terry's computer because, tiny little world, his long-estranged underage daughter Lily was one of the models. He was mortified that she was in there and wanted to make sure no one would find out. Dude, prosecute the human trafficker! That's the way to rescue her. Oh, wow. I mean, I'm trying to imagine his reaction to his boss trying to build a case against his tall, little, small, little, more or less estranged daughter. And, oh, hell yeah. Class D felony evidence tampering. Fire his ass from a cannon. Once she has a name, though, Annabeth heads over to talk to Lily, who doesn't want to, but okay, fine, she will. She testifies that she's been meeting gross older Terry clients for a year, starting when she was 16, and she's 17 now, and Terry's got lists of all the extra services she provided. So, along with the promotion of prostitution, including Lily's photos on her raunchy mama's website, gets Madame Terry charged with child pornography, along with solicitation, which Annabeth says gets the FBI involved. She'll spend the rest of her days as a registered sex offender, in case being morally responsible for Shannon's suicide wasn't enough. There's an aspect of this show where they occasionally try to move beyond the rote legal procedural to the human impact of the cases. The concept of close to home sought to find the humanity among the lurid morality plays, which I'll point out just as often contributed to the histrionics. But like for this one, along with the high-tech hooker book clubs, the writers included a brief exchange toward the end, which I think elevated the show beyond mere titillation. Annabeth meets with Shannon's husband after pre-trial rulings, and I'll admit, I've been waiting for this scene since the opening credits. I saw across my screen the name Austin Tichenor. Now, I very obliquely highlighted the Reduced Shakespeare Company podcast in episode 26, and I know I've talked about them elsewhere from time to time. Third anniversary of this work back in 2020, my conversation with Mark Bailey, I expressed interest in Joss Whedon's 2012 production of Much Ado About Nothing, featuring Amy Acker and Alexis Denisov as Beatrice and Benedict, as highlighted in the, at the time, recent conversation on that podcast between Ms. Acker and host Austin Tichenor, which is a long way to go toward applauding that weekly effort. But yeah, a big part in my featuring this one. Austin as Dawn Cook, widower of this suburban housewife who committed suicide when her neighbor went to the media about men streaming in and out of her home. Dawn tells prosecuting attorney Annabeth Chase that Madame Terry sent him a letter, apparently right out of the blue, listing all her Johns and how much she was paid and everything she'd done to earn it. He didn't know what to do, he said. Then, when he saw the video on the news, he lost it, grabbed the kids, and took off. I should have let her explain, he said. I should have listened. And now my kids have lost their mother. His Shakespearean training, I thought, opened a new channel for Macduff. I got to see recently in the Joel Cohen masterpiece Tragedy Macbeth. All my pretty ones. Did you say all? Oh, Hellkite, all my pretty chickens and their dam, one fell swoop. Come back to that later. Annabeth asks Dawn if there's anything she can do, and his mouth hardens. You can make Terry pay for what she did to my family. Please tell me you'll do whatever it takes to get that woman. To which she affirms, whatever it takes. I'll mention he showed up with a date book, address book, and some photos, but the writers could have had him include that letter he said Terry sent him, which honestly sounds like Exhibit A. Madam Terry spends a whole episode floating along above everything because she's so much smarter than everyone else, and then for at least 2 different RajiMamas.com models, she sends material evidence connecting all the dots to people who'd presumably love to see her in prison, and in neither case does it occur to either of them to turn it over. But that's the level of writing on this show. Show developer Jim Leonard's approach in structuring these episodes tended toward discovery. The audience pulled along as the prosecuting team follows clues and traced evidence where it led, so the plot twists were baked into the structure. We all thought it was heading one way, but oh wow, that this new clue, that recalcitrant witness, that unpredictable reveal sent us all careening in a new direction, and suddenly it's an entirely new case. Shows that rely so heavily on plot twists and dramatic reveals are like shaking car keys at infants. They're endlessly fascinating because constant surprise. One episode was so completely over the top, I longed to learn that it was the last that 2005 me was willing to put up with, but I see just from this set of cataloging that I've followed it well into its 2nd season. Yep, a couple weeks later, close to home, aired its Romeo and Juliet Murders. Ew, see, it's all Shakespeare and fancy! An episode titled as pompous as it is spoilery, though it's never a bad time to point out that at least Romeo and Juliet were never brother and sister. That one, the police were called into a noise complaint from an out-of-control house party. Local law enforcement discovered that the teenage kids, Scott and Tracy, were unsupervised except for an uncle who stopped by from time to time because the parents had flown to Europe 2 weeks ago and never checked in with anyone. Oh, that was probably them in the opening scenes of the episode, being buried in a shallow grave in the park. The prosecutors are interviewing the children, noting that someone had gotten into the pharmacy sales rep's dad's sample case. The boy, Scott, said some guy named Ron would sometimes meet his dad in the garage. Well, the investigation can't turn up any evidence the parents even made it to Europe, and a jogger finds their bodies buried in the park, and the questioning focuses on the kitchen wiped down with bleach. Turns out one of the kids was adopted, and then how they were sleeping together, and their parents found out, so the daughter shot them. The boy cleaned up the crime scene. Yeah, Close to Home is pretty much crime porn, and not just for the over-the-top family drama storylines. Families in these situations, we wouldn't be cycling through out-of-hand, unsupervised children, inattentive teachers, vacationing absentee parents, shallow graves and curious sniffy dogs, dad's mysterious phantom friend Ron and illicit drug connections, then Uncle Benign neglect and the whole school parties. Maybe it's Ron, maybe it's abuse, maybe the kids are sleeping together. There's so much more than that. Like, if it had been going on for any amount of time, Scott said more than a year, classmates would be creeped out by the whole Jack and Meg thing between them and would say so. Their parents would notice the weirdness. High school drama club or not, these prosecutors are trained professionals who would trap these idiot kids in something way before Tracy completely changed her testimony in open court. Were you lying then, or are you lying now? Also, looking at the text messages would have occurred to someone way before it did in this investigation. Good old Steve Sharp again. Text messages? I could barely figure out how to talk on my cell phone. Maybe DA stands for something other than district attorney then. Dumbass. The vacation itself, European vacations post 9/11 have records of people getting on planes, getting off planes, going through customs. Hell, pre-9/11 people had to go through customs. Uncle's sitting there, oh, I don't want to besmirch his good name as some kind of purveyor of illicit drugs. My dude, your niece and nephew are doing the nasty. And I think, yeah, once they found out, they'd have canceled their plans. Your kids in bed together is force majeure. Oh, isn't the sunset as we drift along the Seine so beautiful this time of year? I do hope they're using protection. Child Protective Services mandatory counseling. I get the kids killed them, but it's hard to... Oh, never mind. This was dumb. Along with this other B-story thing where the DA demanded that the assistant DA charge tweakers as meth dealers to get that sweet, sweet weed and seed funding. Which, yeah, fantastic storyline, guys. It was hard to denigrate anti-drug community development programs in 2005, but you went for it. I don't know how much Close to Home I archived. More, certainly, by my estimate, far too many. But Yeah, absolutely. Let's call it a range of quality to these things. Very cool to find the one with Austin Tichenor. Right? So much so, I took a picture of his appearance on screen and tweeted it to the Reduced Shakespeare Company at Reduced from at TJ VideoFuzzy with the caption, "Was he ever so young?" And he responded, "Who doesn't remember that hit show? It is potentially among the more obscure entries." I let him know my plans to feature the episode he was in. He was kind enough to record the blurb at the end of this segment. It's so cool to connect a little with, I'm just going through these discs, finding these shows, and then you get to interact with the people involved in making them. Now, to be fair, Mr. Tichenor felt more than usually approachable. I do a podcast. He does a better podcast. I've listened to him for years, invite listener feedback in various forms, which may have guided my initial approach, but all this name dropping, I just thought it was so cool to see. Certainly a bright point in watching these things.
Hi, I'm Austin Tichenor, 1/3 of the Reduced Shakespeare Company and the host of the Reduced Shakespeare Company podcast. And God's help you, you're listening to VideoFuzzy.
Cross Connection. Jerry Bruckheimer's Close to Home premiered in 2005, a year after Joss Whedon's Vampire with a Soul detective series Angel was shuttered, and with it the storyline for Lindsay McDonald, played by Kristen Kane, which I've said before, I followed Kane to the CBS series and his recurring appearances as good-natured, studly young suburban father and husband Jack Chase. He was not any less watchable, but his presence alone was never going to save the show. Having found Austin Tichenor in Close to Home, I took a peek at where else he might appear in my media archive. Sure enough, there he is in the first season episode of The West Wing. I show him in the second season premiere of Nip Tuck, along with Vanessa Redgrave. Not bad. I also certainly saw him in The X-Files and Alias. He had a recurring role as cabinet secretary in the second season of 24, so that's absolutely in here somewhere. Nice. I see where he's another of the intriguingly large selection of people I encounter, having played different characters in The Practice and spin-off series Boston Legal. So Tichenor represents a direct link to my Studio 6 Feet Under challenge, both through The West Wing to Bradley Whitford in Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, and through Boston Legal to Ed Begley Jr. in 6 Feet Under, putting his work at or near mystical centrality in my media collection. Cool. I also wanted to highlight a few strong recurring characters I encountered, not least of which Laurie Metcalf as Carolyn Bigsby on a significant third season episode of Desperate Housewives, confronting her philandering husband at gunpoint and holding an entire supermarket hostage. I also found Josh Hopkins on a first season Brothers and Sisters. If you're having trouble placing the name, it's Grayson on Cougar Town. Episode was pure farce. Whole family shows up at the ranch house up north and ruins everyone else's sex weekend. Very Noel Coward. Oh, and I saw Carrie Preston from Claws in HBO's True Blood. That was cool. And Bruno Campos from Nip Tuck recurred in USA's Royal Pains. Wild. Golden Thread. While the Romeo and Juliet murders episode itself was naff, I just could not get past the uncle. I knew I'd seen him before. IMDb tells me it was Jeff Perry, and turns out he's all over my collection, mostly as Meredith's estranged father Thatcher Gray in Grey's Anatomy, but appearing in quite a lot of things once. Apart from Close to Home, I have been watching him since his appearances in My So-Called Life. I think he recurred as a school counselor who took Ricky in when his family disowned him or something. He was in Frasier, The West Wing, The Practice. He was in Lost, Numbers. I think I saw him in an extended promo they ran for Invasion I found in this set. He was with Jeff Goldblum in Reigns. He was in Side Order of Life. He was in Saving Grace. He showed up in an episode of Fringe, and I'm told he has a recurring role on Prison Break, though I'm not really placing him at the moment. At first, Jeff Perry seems like the color beige, but I think there's a lot more there. Maybe he ends up as the negative space against which other, more dynamic characters get to define themselves, but when he gets a chance to develop a character, he acquits himself as a capable storyteller in his own right, and it becomes clear that he brings the right definition to those scenes in which others shine.
Diving into my classic collection.
Sticking with the 2005 era material for the moment, I mentioned running into the Stephen Bochco production of Blind Justice on disc 1259, which just... Whew, boy. I found the doggone episode with Ron Eldred as Detective Jim Dunbar, who is blind and plot critical, is part of a sting operation tracking down a stash of 25 pounds of cocaine that went missing post an eviction or something. The most burn-after-reading group of people imaginable are trying to sell it. Some of them use some of it, and meanwhile the dealers are looking to recover it because that's not an inconsiderable amount of cocaine. Say, didn't we start measuring cocaine in metric in Miami Vice? Never mind, it's hardly the least credible aspect of the story. They have Dunbar trailing the drugs to the drop. Something goes ever so predictably wrong as his support crew try to follow him, and the bad guys have isolated Dunbar somewhere in New Jersey and driven off with his seeing eye dog. Dunbar manages to call in. They're asking him where he is, and he says he does not know. I'm not a blind person and I am not a cop, but I do know you're supposed to pay attention when you're, say, crossing a big-ass bridge to New Jersey and be able to describe sounds you hear. No, he's not magic, but he is in law enforcement, and I know for sure before they send you out anywhere with their white cane and your badge, your occupational training is going to involve getting your bearings in unfamiliar surroundings. Anyway, within a few minutes he'd figured that out, mostly by making his way to a rusty sign on a chain-link fence, and he was recovered by Hoboken PD. I mentioned Nip Tuck up there. I was surprised to see Robert Lasardo. Before his recurring role in that show, he appeared as a drug dealer in this one, figuring among the voices Dunbar heard with the sting operation was going sideways. Back at the station, Dunbar is able to identify him by his voice, which gives them some possible leads. He's realizing how lost he is without his dog, though, who, by the end of the episode, turns up in the care of a Good Samaritan and is returned. In the following episode, Dance With Me, Saul Rubinek recurs as Dunbar's psych consult and meets with Jim and his wife, Christine, played by Rena Sofer, who are having trouble communicating. In this episode, 11th in the series, Jim expresses surprise to learn that his colleague Tom, played by Rena Wilson, is black, despite working with him for months and Lasardo's character calling him Negrito the week before. Again, blind and frozen out a little socially for his first few weeks there, but there would be so many context clues. He has been working there for months as a detective, after all, as Tom demands of him, "What, do you think you were just working with Eminem for the past 4 months?" Jim said he just thought Tom sounded groovy. Right. I feel like this wouldn't be the worst time to bring up the concept of liability. NYPD has an a priori commitment to public service, and putting Jim on street duty is outrageous. Not diminishing his humanity in any way, just saying that part of a detective's job is investigating and documenting incidents for the purpose of bringing criminals to justice, something he's going to have some difficulty in doing should he ever be asked to testify in court. This guy in the witness dock, Alan Shore from Boston Legal, would make short work of transferring ownership of the NYPD to any potential claimant. I'll just leave this with a quick Google search that suggests that there's a visual acuity standard for service as a police officer in the U.S. This guy in 2005, a blind detective on Netflix in 2013, DC had Daredevil and a 2007 era story about half a dozen visually impaired drug agents in Belgium. But no, not saying there are none, but as of this recording, I'm unaware of any active duty blind officers or detectives anywhere, regardless of how doable a team of writers in a 100% controlled and locked down fictional situation suggests it might be. Speaking of physical improbabilities, I talked about Ron Livingston as the oh my god, awah husband and father, real estate god of his universe, also suicide, swinging around as John Dixon in A Million Little Things. I ran across him in this set on disc 1258 in a space opera, Defying Gravity. Ron Livingston as Maddox Donner is basically this slab of ego-sizzled porterhouse steak swaggering around in space, getting everyone pregnant, spattering the walls with testosterone, and being all grr when he's not having traumatic flashbacks. Also, Primetime Network, lots of sexy interactions, is basically Grey's in space. I can see a draw for this character, but yeah, this is not especially strong writing, or science for that matter. Sprung from the inexorable burdens imposed by life on our terrestrial surface, the human body starts shedding bone and muscle mass almost instantly, and by this episode, Maddox could have swapped out body doubles with Jim Parsons. I think a crew on an interplanetary jaunt would demand a bit more decorum, at least about where all the sex was happening. On a related note, I ran into an episode of The Universe on Disc 1253 talking about space tourism. In this 2009 production, Eric Anderson, then president and CEO of Space Adventures, said, "I can't tell you when it will be 4,000, but I can tell you it will never be 4,000 if it doesn't start off at 40 million. Intriguing. Also, on Disc 1257, I found a third season episode of Mad Men opened with the astonishing Anne Margaret singing her heart out in the most 1963 performance ever of Bye Bye Birdie. The team is screening it because Pepsi wants a frame-for-frame rendition in support of their Diet Right knockoff called Patio. While certainly eye-catching, Elizabeth Moss's copywriter Peggy points out the commercial isn't for dudes. It's for her. Pepsi's target market for this product is women. Completely missing her point, Rich Semmer's Harry says, "You're not fat anymore." Dude, she's... Oh my god. Later, Don watches the scene with her and points out that the feeling being sold is, "I'm young and I'm happy and desperate for a man. Men want her. Women want to be her." Well, I will say that when Peggy takes a run at the song in the mirror, it is fantastic. I didn't even know, or remember, rather, that she could sing. Well done. Speaking of singing, after the karaoke declaration and Drop Dead Diva I mentioned last time, I found a follow-up episode on Disc 1254 featuring Georgia Fox, Elliot Gould, and Tim Gunn, of all people. Great lineup. It's a fun show. By the 6th episode, Deb's friend Stacy is falling for Deb's guardian angel, Fred, Ben Feldman's Fred, and the late Deb's fiancée, Grayson, is showing some interest in Jane. He was able to close a chapter with a graveside meeting with a client, and Jane also had a win exonerating a nurse in a murder case. The show is structural farce, and the writing has found its level at basic cable dramedy. Drop Dead Diva reads as if Dexter's sister wrote legal drama. Dexter, that is, from Dexter's Lab, his sister Dee Dee, not Dexter the serial killer. Figured that was an important distinction. The depth? No, but absolutely fun to watch a model's take on what it's like to be a lawyer, and Brooke Elliott's take on what it's like to be a model. Tim Gunn's appearance here reminds me to congratulate Project Runway Season 19 Chantel Cayo out of Nicaragua for claiming the win recently. Absolutely fantastic line. Loved the work, the look, the colors. Ralph and I had it down to Chantel and Coral. We didn't want either of them to lose, so we were pleased with the outcome. Chastity was also a complete mood, rightly identified by guest judge Tommy Hilfiger as a speed dial for celebrity red carpet looks, which leaves Christina, which we felt was valid. We were much more excited by her prints than Hilfiger was, but felt her execution was lacking, and the hoverboard was gimmicky and poorly used. Once the model was headed for her exit, that had been an amazing opportunity for a train transformation. As it was, her lack of movement combined with the almost neck brace aspect of the gown sealed this designer's fate. If you're going to incorporate drama, be dramatic. Back to my collection. On Disc 1270, I found a third season Nip Tuck episode called Ben White, starring John Billingsley, who I've got to say he fought with Jeff to be the golden thread this time. He is one, and I will say how at some point, but for now, he was the iconic metaphor for what was going on in the show. As Dr. Costa came in to replace Sean at Troy McNamara, John Billingsley, his minimalist architect Ben White, had arrived complaining of something called body integrity identity disorder, that his leg had always seemed like some growth on him, an extra appendage. He wanted it removed. At first, Christian is like, "No way, I'm not amputating your leg." As the show continues, Ben shows Christian his intent to remove the leg either way. Christian has a conversation with Sean, and with old flame Kimber Henry telling him to ignore his conscience and just take the money. Christian plans instead to do the right thing, get Ben a psych consult. Ben responds by shooting his leg pretty much off with a hand cannon right in front of him. Christian gets Ben admitted to a hospital. He takes over his surgery after Ben's admit, asks if he's sure, and amputates his leg. This was another instance, like with Season 5, Roxy St. James episode I talked about in episode 69, around the 23-minute mark, where the patient pretty much starts the surgery for them. Oh, also in this episode, Sean's witness protection program contact agent Sagamore, played by Bob Gunton, who I recognize more recently from the first season of Trial and Error, Fun, and Joan Rivers promoting Julia's new face cream, made with discarded Zyga from sperm banks. I can't imagine anything go wrong with that. And I wasn't going to break out into fond reflection this set because there have been far too many of late, but it was hard to ignore the timing on this one. I ran into an episode of The Simpsons from 2003 called Pray Anything. Homer falls in a hole in front of the church and breaks his leg. He sues the church to help pay for home repairs. Attacking his credibility, defense counsel plays a VHS tape of Homer driving in the fog and busting his noggin on several mailboxes. Jury foreman Cletus declares the jury's finding of this submission to be America's funniest home video. Back to you, Bob Saget, and awards Homer $1 million. Rest in peace, Bob. Your contributions to American culture were indeed endless. Holding to a theme, on disc 1261, my collection marks the passing of Leo McGarry on The West Wing, following on the death of actor John Spencer. It was pretty much an in-show memoriam for Spencer, a short address by Martin Sheen at the top of the next episode on from the announcement, and several episodes later on the eve of the election, in character Kristen Chenoweth's discovery of the body. Martin Sheen recorded a very brief memoriam at the top of Season 7, Episode 10, Running Mates, and I'd been watching for it. Sheen toning against a White House backdrop. There was no greater tribute. Well, he can speak well enough. Martin?
On December 16th, we lost our dear friend and colleague, John Spencer. Through our shock and grief, we can think of no more fitting memorial to this wonderful man, this extraordinary actor, than to share with you beginning tonight the last few months of his work here on the West Wing. Johnny, it seems we hardly knew you. We love you, and we miss you.
I pulled up the episode they ran that header, episode 10, Running Mates, which was focused not only on the vice presidential candidates, but also on Terry Polo as Mark Santos' wife, Helen. It was a nice human focus, especially in that the candidate spouse is in a campaign as well. Ahead of the Veet candidate debate, I never noticed stuff like this, but I noticed when Sheen was giving his tribute that they'd propped him in front of the cameras on the West Wing backdrop, wearing something quite comfortable, a dark sweater over a light, not especially well-fitted shirt open at the collar and khakis. Later in the episode, I do not know if it's the same outfit, but Leo McGarry's relaxing on the couch watching television, and if that's not the same outfit, it is so similar, and I thought, I never noticed stuff like this. I just don't. It would be so cool if they'd sent Martin out wearing Leo's clothes from that episode. Like I said, no way of knowing for sure if it was a callback. I'm not sure they were even making one, but it's the kind of thing these storytellers might do. Running Mates had been done and in the can maybe for months at that point, and ahead of a Spencer tribute, they might look for any kind of connection they can make. The tribute up top was Sheen's only appearance in that episode, and seeing him wearing Spencer's clothes for that made me sit up and take notice. It was very cool. In the home stretch of the final season, 7 episodes later, Election Night Part 2, the emotional impact of McGarry's death sent shockwaves through the storylines, but in the end, Santos is declared the winner, and the entire campaign staff trails him down for the victory speech, but Bradley Whitford is Josh Lyman, former Deputy White House Chief of Staff under McGarry, now Santos' campaign manager, grimly surveys the wreckage of a war room and the map filled in declaring the razor-thin 2-vote electoral college win. He walks over to a photo collage of Santos and McGarry, still images of Leo taken during the campaign, and he says, "Thanks, boss." Thank you indeed, Mr. Spencer. What else? Well, I mentioned the Comedy Central roast Pamela Anderson up there aired August 2005, hosted by Jimmy Kimmel, ahead of apparently significant weight loss. Well done, sir. I'm just intrigued by the roast format. I grew up in the 1970s. I feel like I watched a lot of sitcoms. I feel like there was a lot of sarcasm driving the comedy. Then I watch a lot of Evening at the Improv, and there's quite a lot of comedians working blue, and there's this reality, and canned laughter tends to lose its damn mind when somebody says something truly hurtful, that if people all lived with each other and said these things to each other, they'd leap. Well, families just have to find a way to make it work, and saying hurtful things to each other is a great way to pad out the end of the show, reconciling with wronged parties, apologies, everyone feel better. Now, quick, gentle callback to the original hurtful thing that was said so we can freeze on a reaction shot. I think when I've seen clips from Friars Club roasts from the 50s or thereabouts, they lit into each other pretty good. They got the yucks, and sarcasm is hardly an invention of Norman Lear, but It was so pervasive, and stand-up acts had to work to stand out, and pretty much for any Gracie Allen who emerged, you'd get half a dozen Andrew Dice Clays. Dennis Leary is a product of this era. Colin Quinn, God love him, Greg Giraldo, Lisa Lampanelli, Gilbert Gottfried. By 2005, loosed by this time from the strictures, the Friars Club clearly imposed. What you got was this spectacle in which people competed to land the most damaging cruelty against one another, publicly, on camera, and then going in for a hug after. Not just the guest of honor, but everyone on the dais, none of them innocent bystanders. When Pam sat for this, the sex tape with Tommy Lee had just been circulated, so the jokes traced a predictable arc. But I wanted to highlight one act in particular because it was perfect. It was devastatingly cruel and vicious, hilariously funny, and the artist involved almost entirely blameless. On disc 1264 in my media collection from August of 2005, I have the incomparable B. Arthur reading excerpts from Pamela Anderson's novel Starstruck. It is as funny, no, funnier than you could possibly imagine it being. It exists, and I have it. I also have a song by the group who did the theme song for The Sopranos. Alabama 3 is showing up on disc 1251 of this set in a first season episode of Being Human. The song is called Too Sick to Pray, which I thought was very cool. I wanted to highlight that. Definitely added to my collection. Very chill vibe from a couple decades back.
Checking out my current collection.
In my current direct-to-DVD collection, I archived the title inspiration for this effort, Turner Classic Movies' presentation of Orson Welles' art documentary, F is for Fake. This 1973 work, cast member Peter Bogdanovich, who started put together as Welles' final opus as a writer, director, and editor, was an expose on this Elmir Dahori person, alleged to be a top art forger. Len's distracted momentarily by jet-setting Croatian actor Oya Kotor. As we see her, she's snarling up traffic with guys leering at her from every direction. How is any of this remotely significant? Well, we'll come back to that. F is for Fake is described as a free-form documentary centered on two fakers operating, it is understood, independently in Ibiza. We had, as mentioned, Elmir Dahori and his biographer Clifford Irving, who also wrote an autobiography of reclusive billionaire Howard Hughes that we're told was based entirely in fiction. The clips we see of Elmir, whatever his dozens of aliases, show him to be a beau vivant. Even art forgeries he made in front of us on camera, the artists themselves can discern the fakes from their own works. In a scene stuffed full of bonhomie, Welles asserts that, as a Hungarian, Elmir would more likely be offended not to be seen as some sort of scheming underworld rogue, as apparently accepting the title of greatest art forger of the 20th century. Of all the Hungarian friends I've ever had, Welles said, I can't remember one who didn't want me to think of him as the king of con men. Elmir, for his part, characterized art dealers as crooked, and another clip discussed the art world as a huge confidence trick. I guess we're talking about art pieces as the NFTs of their time, but again, what is the point of any of this? Oblique references to lawyers and what they're allowed to say. Well, you're a documentary. The truth is a defense, if indeed the truth is what's happening here. Orson throws it to art experts, and if the lawyers would allow us, we would name a gallery showing the entire exhibit of modern post-impressionists painted by Elmir. He forged a Matisse in front of us, and Welles intoned, one nod from an expert, and that piece of canvas could be worth $100,000. As it is in the next moment, he burns it in a fireplace. Elmir is heard to say, bye-bye, Matisse. The story shifts to Welles' early career, traveling the Irish countryside as an artist, flim-flamming his way onto the stage. We got comments from Joseph Cotton, initially tapped to play a Howard Hughes type, something of a biopic. They shifted the story from an aviation to a newspaper tycoon, and the role went to Welles and Citizen Kane. Cotton wonders aloud if they'd gone the first route, if he'd been the first or the last to portray Hughes on screen. Welles shares what he knows of Howard Hughes from the very late 1940s, as he says a quarter century before. Clifford Irving based his book entirely on whole cloth, or cloth woven for him. We are led to surmise this master forger of Hungarian extraction, Elmir, trying he was, say, a step ahead of the feds, crisscrossing North America from Mexico to Canada to New York to Texas. Wells dismisses gossipy Las Vegas rumors as Hughes denied. A voice from a speaker box understood to be his, anyway, denied having met or done any interview with Clifford Irving, let alone the basis for an autobiography. Wells draws the forgeries into the world of food somehow, how artists supposedly put their work on the walls of restaurants, thereby raising the profile and probably getting some free food out of the deal. He referenced another Hungarian artist, Bertej, who he said, like all Hungarians, told the best Hungarian jokes. An omelette. You know that one, don't you? It's a classic. Wells cited Bertej. It's in our Hungarian cookbook. To make an omelette, it says, first, steal an egg. Casual racism is fun. By this time, Elmir Dahori has served time and is released, welcomed back into society, and Wells cites his girlfriend at the time, Croatian actor Oya Cotter, mentioned that they're wandering around. As long as there are fakers, I guess there will have to be experts. But if there were no experts, would there be any fakers? As Wells tells the story, the Picasso story.
A friend, another friend, once showed a Picasso to Picasso, who said no, it was a fake. The same friend brought him from yet another source, another would-be Picasso, and Picasso said that too was a fake. Then yet another from another source, also fake, said Picasso. But Pablo, said his friend, I watched you paint that with my own eyes. Said Picasso, I can paint false Picassos as well as anybody.
I'd assert that Picasso is the one artist in the history of the universe incapable of crafting a fake Picasso, but it stands. I've a couple of times now questioned what in fact the point of all this is. A talented person adds to the world's collection of art pieces that remind one of Picasso or Matisse. People admire them, people purchase the fakes as though they are real and display them as such, and no one is hurt by this. Paint has been applied to canvas, and because the artist, I think that's what we ought to call art forgers because it's more fun, but because the artist was sufficiently clever or insightful or intuitive to fool an expert, it's a Matisse, it's a Picasso. A person convinces mass media operations he's spoken with Howard Hughes, scanned through hundreds of documents, and written an autobiography. That's already... If it's an autobiography, the reclusive billionaire handed it to you through his mail slot. It did not come through some random overseas scribbler. Hungry as the world might be for any juicy details, fiction is just fiction, and that's apparently how Hughes, as this David Lynchian voice from a speaker box, dismissed Clifford Irving's tale, denied ever meeting the man. It's just pure fantasy. That fake is potentially more disturbing, but easier to dismiss out of hand, and regardless of the prevalence of drugs in that era, it's surprising to me that the story of it made it to print in the first place. But the point, Wells tells us in a blink and you'll miss it segment of the film, lies, he says, in Chartres, a stately Gothic cathedral in France, a creation built, demolished, and restored over the centuries, with a history tracing back to the dawn of the Holy Roman Empire. Standing as a premier work of man, perhaps in the whole Western world, and it's without signature. It stands, he says, as a celebration of God's glory and the dignity of man.
Our works in stone, in paint, in print, are spared, some of them for a few decades or a millennium or two, but everything must finally fall in war, or wear away into the ultimate and universal ash. The triumphs and the frauds, the treasures and the fakes, the fact of life. We're going to die. Be of good heart. Cry the dead artists out of the living past. Our songs will all be silenced. But what of it? Go on singing.
For the next hour, Wells intoned at the top of the piece, we will be absolutely truthful. For the final third of the film, however, Wells said just any damn thing about Lear bait, Oya Cotter, and Picasso's apparently endless fascination with her multitudinous costume changes, bothered by an amateur trombonist Olaf parked outside his window constantly torturing him with jazz music. I don't know how that relates, but apparently Picasso's fascination extended to her stopping by every afternoon and modeling for him. This was all outside the part of the film Wells assured us they were being scrupulously truthful, however, so it's hard to know whether any of this actually happened. The film sure implied a lot. 22 paintings of her she got to keep in exchange for her time as his model. Then an announcement of a show in Paris. Picasso flew there in a rage against the showing of those works, but on seeing them he knew they were not his pieces. But whose? Oya, we are told, well, again, it was heavily implied, was Elmire's granddaughter. And a remembered conversation between Elmire and Picasso were created between Wells and Oya, his girlfriend at the time, attributing these words to Elmire on his deathbed. You've seen my big Cézanne at the Metropolitan. Is that just a forgery, my friend? Is it not also a painting? As well as, do you think I should confess? To what? Committing masterpieces? After reminding us all this whole exchange and the events they describe were fabrications, Wells brought things to a close with a quote from Picasso, that art is a lie that makes us realize the truth. For most of 1973, of course, the world-renowned artist Pablo Picasso was unavailable for comment. Elmire Horig himself died, Google says, by suicide in December of 1976, 3 years after the film was released in Spain, a year after it was released in French and New York film festivals, and the same year it was released elsewhere in Europe. Wells, of course, lived until 1985. My first reaction to this film and its motivations were middle school theater. A middle-aged Orson Welles chuffed at purchasing a Matisse and some college art student pointing out that it can't be a Matisse because it's upside down or something, putting Welles in a right snit, fuming through research and production art experts. Everyone's an expert, I'll show you, into almost Kelsey Grammer levels of rage where Fraser is given the wrong wine or something. I will say that the film is edited together very strangely. It is cut together in a barrage of tiny, unsubstantiated clips, the vast majority of which have zero context. The conversations are often stories of things heard, things overheard, things remembered or misremembered. They're set before us as they are. We have a little choice whether or not to accept the reality that they're presenting. Near the beginning, after a third false start, Wells himself acknowledges that the story is jumping around some because that's how it seems to have happened. That, and there's so much George Bluth Sr. happening in all the early 70s in Bees and Flimflammery. If the message is muddled or its intent unclear, it may simply have reflected a moment. The art forgery centered How to Steal $1 Million with Audrey Hepburn and Peter O'Toole. The art heist film Thomas Crown Affair with Steve McQueen and Faye Dunaway had come out just a few years before, 1966 and 1968, respectively. Not to mention the highly anticipated Howard Hughes autobiography itself, set to publish in 1972 until, they asked him about it. It's possible people's interest in art heists, forgeries, and scams made this a ripe topic for the screen. But if it started out to expose fakery in art and became a chance to point out the absurdity of a world in which we demand the truth from creative types, I'd say it made space for itself to become a commentary on the transitory nature of human achievement. Given this space, a man in his late 50s and not fantastic health might well spin a yarn that culminates in an art forger on his deathbed seeking supplication from a master, one who has characterized his life's work as a lie that reveals the truth. Our songs will all be silenced, but what of that? Go on singing. Got you still. I ran into a similar theme in the Action Max presentation of 2013's Trance, which I thought kept a lot of balls in the air, paced quite a lot of plot twists, respectively. Director Danny Boyle's organization of the piece in terms of character, setting, even color palette, built a world I'd never been in, but I could grasp instinctively who these people were and their motivations, even layering in new information as it developed. It worked really well. James McAvoy plays a staffer at an auction house that does art auctions, and he is involved. This is no spoiler because he's revealed instantly, but he's involved in a heist that goes very wrong. The priceless work of art they stole goes missing, and his whereabouts is trapped behind a wall of amnesia from a brain injury he got while stealing it. The crew contacts psychoanalyst Rosario Dawson to help reverse the amnesia, and the whole rest of the movie is Michael Bay explosions, but psychological. It was very exciting. Rosario Dawson is very exciting. I don't think this movie even works without... James McAvoy is a truly inspired performer, so I don't think this movie even works for Rosario Dawson as it creating exactly the character that she does. I don't feel like I need to see a lot of movies twice, but this one I'm definitely coming back to at some point. Another psychological thrill piece, this one a bit messier. I got the Action Max presentation 1993's The Dark Half, a Stephen King story directed by George Romero. Aspiring writer Tad Beaumont, he's having seizures and collapses one day. I think the scariest part of this is where the GP at the county hospital decides he's good to commit some brain surgery on this 10-year-old admit. But while he's poking around in there, he finds Tad's partially developed twin actually inside his brain. Doc cuts him out and stitches him back up as swarms of birds circle ominously. Unfortunately, Tad's twin lives on to some murderous physical manifestation. First as inspiration for violent, commercially successful crime fiction that Tad publishes under the name of George Stark while he teaches button-down college lit classes. One day, a wacko confronts him as the real writer behind trashy horror schlock and threatens to expose his terrible secret. I'm frankly astonished by this plot point, but oh well. Murders happen, violent, bloody murders initially suspected to be Tad in a fugue state, targeting professional threats and detractors in a bloody crime porn thinly disguised as suspense and plot development. As the bodies pile up, he struggles to clear his name and keep his family safe, culminating in a final showdown as he retreats to write one final George Stark adventure. I'd say I found a prototypical horror film in TCM's presentation of The Magician from 1926. It was a brilliant piece of silent film. I noticed a similar formula to one used in modern horror films. A beautiful woman, young and in love, finds herself in mortal danger from a powerful villain. This guy, the magician, creeps into her life and takes control of her free will. He shows her such malevolent visions as he plans to cut her heart out for an evil spell. Her true love, the hero of the piece, handsome, brave, and true, must overcome many obstacles to rescue her, with comic relief sprinkled here and there throughout. He arrives at the villain's lair in the nick of time. The magician, intent on carrying out his evil scheme, rallies for a final duel, but in the end the intrepid hero comes through and the day is saved. I thought it was quite entertaining and told a good story, pretty much standard horror film fare as it would be presented today, and story-wise I'm not sure it didn't outshine the Stephen King piece I was talking about earlier. Of course, it's not always romantic love. In 2012's Gone, presented by Action Max, Amanda Seyfried is Jill, a waitress who escaped from a serial abductor, Jim, who likes to dig deep pits way back in Forest Park and bury his victims. Jill was able to stab him with the bones of a former victim and get away. A year later, new twist, the abductor nabs her sister, Molly, and Jill runs around frantically looking for her. The police are zero help. Danielson shot as Detective Powers doesn't believe Jill and is actually intent on arresting her. Jill's superpowers making up lies on the spot to achieve immediate goals. There's a lot of improbable construction to this plot, but she makes a compelling heroine. I dug it. This seemed like a good opportunity to compare and contrast the two versions of Nightmare Alley I encountered recently. The original, dated 1947, presented by TCM, took a straightforward approach to the story. Tyrone Power's strong lead as Stanton Carlyle, a Rousseau for a roadshow carnival with more ambition than ethics. Together with a young showgirl, he parlays a cold reading act into a big city nightclub floor show, and they enjoy some success. A liaison with a beautiful psychiatrist unlocks some opportunities for a big score when the tycoon seeks to conjure a ghost from his past. I thought Guillermo del Toro's 2021 version was better, largely for the look and for the backstories and motivations he seeded into the characters. Not to mention, every frame of his piece was pure art. Bradley Cooper shown in the lead role as an ambitious but deeply flawed character. Del Toro's remake infused every scene with dreamlike quality, each new angle revealing something unexpected. I'd say it improved on the original at nearly every turn. The whole thing is steeped in atmosphere. It's setting a good chunk of it in New York in the run-up to World War II. Let them go absolutely nuts with steampunk Art Deco sensibility. Kate Blanchett appeared as Dr. Lilith Ritter, and every square inch of her office is an expression of steampunk fan service. Just wow. Her, Bradley Cooper, Toni Collette, Rooney Mara, Richard Jenkins, just this film is beautifully shot, brilliantly cast. The deeper backstories paved the way for darker developments and took the whole thing to just another level. I wanted to watch the TCM presentation of Truman Capote's In Cold Blood from 1967 because I really ought to have by now. I can't say I found it to be especially edifying. It's a good movie to watch in the same set I watched Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek in Badlands from 1973, I guess. Both were pretty nihilistic. Yeah, Jed Bartlett as Kit, the TCM presentation of Badlands. Weird look for you. Rebel without a cause in the hinterlands of South Dakota. Movie star good looks. 25-year-old trash collector rubbing up on a 15-year-old baton twirler recently moved from Texas. They hit the road after Kit murdered Holly's father and burned his house down. This was after Holly's father had shot her beloved dog as punishment for spending time with him. Lots of conflicting emotions there, I imagine. They drove around Kit, mostly not Holly, committing crimes and thefts and robberies and home invasions and murders and stealing gas until they very finally got caught over the border in Canada, and Kit went to prison escorted by 100 soldiers from 2 different nations, all kind of impressed with them. Kind of a bleak Weltanschauung, but what you gonna do? Turning from movies for a bit, I caught the BBC America's Doctor Who Eve of the Daleks special. I missed Bill Murray in the telling of it, but never mind New Year's, it bore a much stronger resemblance to Groundhog Day. That is, some of those stuck in the time loop were aware of it, learned from their previous trips through the loop, and did different things each time. The loop covered an increasingly smaller time counting down from New Year's Eve, and it turns out something to do with the TARDIS rebooting itself post the Flux adventure they'd all just had. Along with making itself a snazzy new interior, the TARDIS undid several deaths several times. It had to, because Daleks targeted the temporal anomaly as an opportunity to confront the Doc about using the Flux event to destroy all Daleks. Of course, one member of Team Do-Over was already having something of a Groundhog Day experience to begin with. Eiling B is Sarah, owner-operator of Elf Storage. Once again, too late for her to do anything about it. Jeff is called in to blow off his shift at, oh hell, we come to explore one of the most bizarre storage facilities in all the world. The principal client, Johnny Salmon, as Nick, comes in to access his unit once a year and uses it, of all the pure, uncut Douglas Adam purposes, to store things women leave behind at his flat. You know, in case they should ever contact him years later wanting their various random items. He's also kind of sweet on Sarah, though, and maybe planning ahead for convenience sake. Should she ever leave something behind, he can just return it to her place of business. Anyway, of all the can't you see we're busy times for Daleks to show up, if no Daleks, space robots, as Sarah calls them, had shown up, it's possible Team Do-Over would have just rejoined the world half an hour later or so in 2022. New year, new TARDIS. Of course, where then would have been the adventure? Not for the first time in this series, someone's confused and random mum is key to averting disaster and saving the day, and on behalf of the Loop Group, well done, Sarah's mom. Time travel is a tough subject to do properly. I also encountered Bruce Willis in BBC America's presentation of 2012's Looper. Yeah, biggest problem with time travel is the concept of linearity. You injure someone in 2044, and by this movie's logic, the them that they are in 2094 suddenly feels it. No, dumbass, you were injured then, and that's an injury you've had and lived with for the past 50 years. The you that you are in 2094 is the same you you've been this whole time. Say if someone cut your leg off 50 years ago, it never grew back, or you're surprised by the appearance of a sudden prosthesis. You just have the prosthetic leg you had yesterday, and the day before, and the one before that, going all the way back to when they first fitted you for it. And if someone kills you in 2044, there's no loop to close. That's not how this works. It's not how any of this works. This, because every event in this movie was still decades in the future from when they made it, including random outbreaks of telekinesis, can't wait for that to start, doesn't change basic facts about causality. The 4400 continues on the CW, and frankly, I am running out of patience for this. In my opinion, issue shows have a hard time building a satisfying narrative, and I'm finding this to be the case on both sides of the argument being made. Case in point, a member of the security detail for the hotel where the 4400 were being detained fell and hurt himself while skateboarding, because it matters to the narrative he's young and Asian. One of the 4400, a young doctor from the 1920s, uses his 4400 ability to heal him, because it matters to the narrative. When this doctor touches someone with an injury, he absorbs it into himself, and he suffers with it until he transmits it to someone else. We have seen returnees with telekinesis, clairvoyance, persuasion. They're fire starters, they're indestructible, they can shape-shift, they can erase powers in others, and one has wings. But 4,400 people who went missing from various points in history, who all returned last fall in, I guess it's Detroit, a mill of quarantine for COVID. The mysterious powers some of them seem to have developed have been of decidedly secondary consideration. With one over-examined exception, so little attention has been paid to the experience of persons uprooted from time reuniting with their families. This has been a worldwide phenomenon, but it's like the 4,400 returnees at the hotel are the only ones anyone sees, knows, or talks about. And so much attention has been paid to how corrupt federal officials want to control them. We've got Wilder Yahi as Jessica Tanner, a power-mad lesbian of color seeking to control every aspect of their lives, at least most of them grown-ass adults, working to turn public sentiment against them and trap them in government conservatorships. And then there's a squad of mostly Caucasian security guards who are casually cruel to their charges because cops just suck. Vin Wing plays Steve Miller, the guard who hurt himself. When T.L. Thompson as Andre heals him, a passerby gets it on her phone and submits the video to the tip line. Miller is enraged at Andre. "People are going to think I'm one of you," he spits. His family's storefront has already suffered years of anti-Asian hate because of the Rona, and I'm over here like, "You're welcome." The only reason Miller can leap to his feet and scold him is because the healing Andre has performed. And later, meeting up with the other guards, they're celebrating the news that they get to just start rounding up returnees who unwittingly signed up for conservatorships. Zach Keller is Ken King, the vicious guard who seems mostly to bully returnees of color, welcomes Miller as one of the good ones, to which Miller replies gamely, "Round 'em up." Gross. This show is easily as bad as the 2009 reboot of V, a hyperventilating, wild-eyed conservative dystopia where all these lizard aliens show up and offer clean, renewable energy and everyone's all taken in by them, and all the while they're making us dependent on them and are actually plotting our destruction ahead of a million ships invading the planet and killing us all. As an aside, that's the mindset infecting ordinary people against their own family member returnees, as Tim Russ, as Elijah Landry, confronts his returnee daughter, LaDonna, played by Kyla Johnson, and accuses her of being a lizard person. Fortunately, her 4,400 ability actually is shape-shifting, and she's able to flee her confinement and return to the hotel disguised as a member of an anti-4400 group, an analog indistinguishable in aim and focus from standard white supremacists. This show isn't really that hard to decode. And it's easily as bad as the Murphy Brown reboot, where every other line took a shrill stance on every left-wing talking point they could manage to evoke. I get the inclination, but that kind of generalized rage whining tends to weaken and actually ends up hurting your cause. Case in point, every other season ran 22 episodes. The reboot ran 13, and they were adding a dog by episode 11. In all of these cases, it's hurting the storytelling. Morality plays populated with two-dimensional characters are generally not especially compelling. It's like this show was greenlit on the value of young writers taking on injustice in this era where such is omnipresent and threw everything on the table. Oh my god, free Britney! All cops are bastards! Black Lives Matter! The government is holding us all down, trying to control all our lives! Oh my god, the poor refugees! But then they shove it all into a meat grinder with powers and time travel, and now all of that is in there we've got to figure out how to weigh the public interests of whether it's a great idea to just release everyone in an active and at the time worsening global pandemic. Never mind the logistics of reuniting a mom who went missing in 1947 with her family in 2021, if it's even possible to track them down at all. What would you do if a guy singing a lullaby near a bus driver could cause a horrific accident, or a woman can touch your hand and just be you down to your fingerprints, or an emotionally unstable teenager can crumple your body like paper and throw you against the wall? How about a human flamethrower? Does the government not have a role to play here in public safety? And every interaction need not read as an after-school special on bullying or racism or injustice. I get it. Injustice is bad. Authoritarian tendencies are bad. The power dynamic into which these returnees have emerged is completely unbalanced, but using it as a prism through which to address and condemn every bad thing happening to everyone sounds like pandering and I'll credit them striving to be a light in the darkness. Speak up, speak out. It's something sci-fi can do. But find some balance between the social justice and the sci-fi, because we're a dozen episodes in now, and I have no idea what's going on. And if I hadn't loved the original, I know I would not be watching this. One solid bright spot has been Naomi on the CW. I've only seen the first few episodes so far, but so far I like it. And as the title character says, every superhero has an origin story, and this one is hers. Naomi's a smart, popular teenager. She was adopted as an infant, as she discovers, and by discovers, I mean looks into it at all. Her adoption coincided with the UFO encounter 16 years ago. Ooh. As we meet her, she's partying till midnight on school night ahead of some kind of significant presentation she's giving for visiting dignitaries at her school, and does somehow fit all of this into running the third most influential Superman blog in all the world. But when Superman makes an appearance actually downtown, she faints and passes out before she can capture any of it on video. Fortunately, she's able to cobble together a lot of different people's cell phone footage into a respectable recreation of the appearance. But when you're running the top Superman blog in the country, it's weird for him to show up in your town and just ignore you right to your face, right? Anyway, the encounter leads her to a tattoo artist downtown who, it turns out, has metal wings and who knows that she's also special. She asks him who he is, and he says, "You're still asking the wrong questions." She asks him who she is, and he tells her about the UFO sighting the night that she was adopted. Researching this information leads her and her friends to a creepy used car salesman downtown. They break into a shop, find a hunk of metal that she found while searching the crash site. He confronted her in the woods and took it from her. She keeps running into him, and what I suppose we must understand is the first manifestations of her power get stronger with each encounter. In the woods, she seems to harness a wind that just gets stronger when she encounters him again later. He seems creepy and malevolent, and he has stolen from her, but the writing is such that he could be a mentor character, or could be just as in the dark about what's going on as she is. It's certainly intriguing, and I'm interested in seeing where it's going. After all, she's narrating it as her origin story. Who knows how far along she is in the telling of it.
What I've been watching.
In what I've been watching, I broke down and subscribed to Apple TV specifically, because I mentioned up there I wanted to see Joel Coen's The Tragedy of Macbeth. Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand talk about some powerful performances. Not throughout. Lady Macbeth actually surprised a bit of callback from Nomadland and Bird After Reading, but I think Frances McDormand actually has trouble presenting deranged. I think I watch her searching for it. Probably the most grounded human being on the planet, so watching her grasp at neurodivergence from at least 3 different directions, 4, the 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri, I think that was probably her best one, but it's like she always needs to let me know that I'm in here, this is a character I'm playing. Thank you. Denzel, I heard, he found it, this voice, initially bemused by the witches, then his own ambition takes hold. That fight he had with Banquo with Feast, Christ, freaking amazing. Oh my, wow. Corey Hawkins lost it as Macduff. I give my approximation up there. I believed that loss, and by the end, you know what? I'm not even going to play anymore. You're just dead. The shout out can't do this without the witches. Coen had a vision and they fulfilled it. Contortions, portents, spells. Oh wow, the way he did the bloody child fleance. This is why you put this on a screen, is to create these realities. The stuff you simply cannot do on a stage. Excellent production. I'm not sure I need the streaming services, especially since, well, I don't hate it. With Bluetooth, I figured out how to cast to my TV. But like I said before, streaming is my very least favorite way to watch stuff, even though it has gotten much, much better. This seems like a good space to talk about current media consumption. As I tracked through my iTunes to discover which songs transferred to this machine properly and which didn't, I found something off the soundtrack to 1998, Great Expectations with Gwyneth Paltrow, Lauren Christie's Walk This Earth Alone. This song was released in 1997. It's a great vibe, great energy. I thought it was so cool to run into it. The same artist, completely different soundtrack off the From and inspired by Batman and Robin. I have Lauren Christie singing that darkly seductive Breed, also fun. Lincoln Park, I ran into their collaboration with Rakim, who expanded their excoriation of Catholic sex abuse scandal to the ripe field of corporate corruption, followed in my collection by Numb, an anthem independence I probably needed to hear about 2 decades before I did, but so cool to hear these together and the power of these voices. Rakim and lead singer Chester Bennington. Google's telling me he died by suicide at the age of 41. Too sad. Also found Lives Freaks off their Secret Samadhi from 1997, which I thought was so dark and interesting. The video for that one was wild. I know I've got it in here somewhere. Guy walks into a nightclub where the band is performing this song. He sits down and notices everyone in the place is drinking milk. It's a nightclub Moloko bar. He orders coffee, refuses any milk in it, and the energy turns really fast. He has transgressed in this space, and it does not end well for him. That was late 90s creepy. Shout out and high fives to my friend Mikey Heinrich for pointing me in the direction of opening sequence of John Cena's Peacemaker. That is so wackadoo 1980s skating rink. I am not sure I want HBO Max just yet. Clips I've seen are hilarious, but I'll throw the band Wigwam $1.29 for Do You Really Want to Taste It? Activity is activity, and for Christ's sakes, eagerly at the end, checks hit his mark. I can't win this. Look it up. It's worth it. It's friggin' hilarious. Well done, everyone. Speaking of awesome collaborations, I recently took YouTube's, it's been in my suggested videos for months, the Ultimate James Bond Medley. I finally made time, or just decided I had 25 minutes to watch. Oh wow, it's dozens of artists each taking lead on a scrap of it, making it their own. I want to highly recommend this. The link is everywhere I can put it. Check it out. It's called Raffle Audio, like rolling on the floor laughing audio, but while the vibe is light, the artistry is on point, and these people understood the assignment. Well friggin' done. It's long, but it's worth it. Block out the time and check it out. Crunching some numbers. I'll get into the stats presently. I wanted to add something to the show so far, and it involves the process for this production. Lately, the turnaround time on these things has been lorfing into 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. I end up hastily banging out a video, then audio promo, then slamming it desperately into the feed as I get to work on the next one. This one I posted the catalog episode 79 on December 21st, and the promo, audio, and video for that one a couple weeks later on January 6th. So once I've watched, archived, and cataloged everything I'm going to for an episode, it appears to take at least a week to shape my notes into some kind of episode, and then at least another week to record it and edit a video in the podcast. This was interesting to me because it feels like that process takes forever. In the past few months, I've upgraded my editing software. I've also been listening to past episodes for an upcoming project and cringing at the poor audio quality, goofs, and just plain out mistakes you, all my beloved listeners, have had to put up with in the past. At some point, I'd love to get it ahead of the 5-year milestone for this show, but I also know exactly what happens every time I make any kind of deadline for myself, and well know the sound they make as they go whooshing on by. I'd love to clean up the audio on those, kill that microphone hum, smooth out some sibilants, level out some levels, and repost them as a more pleasant audio experience. There's not a ton of back catalog activity for this effort, but maybe if it were nicer to listen to, there might be, I don't know, more. Like I said, no idea when I'd get to that, but I've got access to some powerful editing tools I never had in the past. I feel like there'd be value in making the effort. First, I added discs X427 through X437. That's 11 discs at, on average, 6 hours per disc, which is most of 3 days' worth of material. Bearing in mind I watched it all in real time, that ends up being a significant investment of time. I watched most of that between January 7th and January 24th. From January 24th to January 26th, I cataloged that archive and put some notes together while doing so. The night of Wednesday, January 26th, I put disc 1251 in my player and began cataloging my classic collection for this installment, and that's more or less what I was working on through 2:30 a.m. on Saturday, February 5th. I finally cataloged through disc 1275. My notes open the whole time, so by the time I was done I had 18 pages of notes and a ton of organizing to do. First, I had to catch up a little on current shows if I was going to talk about them, and fortunately I had nearly a full disc's worth of space to fill up by watching more of 4400's Claus and Naomi, which also just happened to fill up a fourth binder of current recordings, so yeah, that absolutely happened. I cataloged disc X438, and by Sunday, February 6th, I had posted my blog entry in case there were any aspects of this cataloging adventure people were especially interested in. Hearing none, I to my own heart were true. Next, one of the tougher parts, scripting this thing. I've been chipping away at it little by little from February 6th to this past weekend. The Friday night feature took most of the first week all by itself, mainly because Close to Home is kind of all over the place. I finished my Friday night feature by February 12th or thereabouts, my classic collection by February 15th, and my current collection right up by Saturday, February 19th. So that is how long these things can take in putting together. The recording and editing then took the amount of time that they took. You'll be able to tell by when it drops. As for actual stats, this by-the-number segment marks a fairly auspicious moment, in part because I'm so close to the numerical halfway point for this collection. As of this month, I've archived through disc 1275 in my current collection, and the halfway mark on 2570 discs is 1285. I've said for a while this is the halfway mark numerically because virtually all my discs so far have had 2 hours of material each. One had 6, one was blank, and one number got skipped, so that's 6 plus 0 for an average of 2 hours each, so I guess that actually all evened out. But at some future point I will encounter discs with 6 hours of material on them, and at that point the cataloging will take, any guesses? Yep, 3 times longer. Not that it's not taking plenty long enough getting through 25 at a time now and writing up commentaries. I pause to wonder what this project would look like doing 10 discs at a time. Current projections suggest I've got a little over 5 years left in the current format, with about 50 more episodes of a classic collection at a rate of about 10 episodes a year. 10 discs at a time predictably more than doubles that number with about 130 episodes, which seems mind-blowing. Of course, I never knew what 80 episodes would look like when I started this. I mentioned having listened through most of my back catalog up there. Generally, I feel pretty good about the trajectory of this effort. For sure, I'd have less material to talk about at 10 discs per episode. I'd get through the writing, recording, and editing process faster. Yeah? Hard to know. I've met me, and I feel like I'd go into the same amount of detail on Friday Night Feature. Name of that segment, that's a leftover from a younger, more optimistic version of me who thought I could post an installment on a weekly basis. Simply unrealistic. Rethinking that thing for sure. And whatever the periodicity of the installments, I still have nearly 1,300 discs at catalog, so it's going to take the time it takes. I guess for episode 81, I'll get through disc 1,300 and decide how to proceed from there. As for this episode, I've cataloged through disc 1275 in my classic collection and disc X438 in my current collection. That set filling 4 binders with about 110 discs each at some 6 hours of material per disc. That pencils out to about 2,550 hours of media in my classic collection, or about 3.5 months, and nearly 2,630 hours of media in my current collection, or close to 3 2/3 months. That's more than 7 months of searchable media that I've cataloged altogether in a collection of, at this point it is official, more than 3,000 home-burned DVDs. That's 2,570 discs in my classic collection as of this installment, nearly half of which are cataloged, and 438 discs in my current collection for a total now of 3,008. This is a significant milestone. I've been sneaking up on 3,000 for so long and can finally call it true. Very happy with that effort in this media collection. And that only accounts for VHS to DVD transfers and direct-to-digital recordings in my home media collection. I've also got shelves of commercial media I still add to occasionally, and as you can tell from the episode segments, more often streaming material now when I started this project. Archiving is a gray area for streaming material. I feel like if it's on my screen, I should be able to record it, but some services, Apple TV is among them, are quite clear that this is not the case, and so be it. I do predict a second Dark Ages in my media consumption, wherein I'll know for sure that I've seen something but can't access it anymore because either I no longer subscribe to the service or they're not running it anymore because some actor or producer did something problematic, or all the rights have been bought by this company and that company they didn't transfer. It's a world we're entering, and it's called to mind, not for the first time in recent memory, an African proverb. When elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. That said, it's unlikely I'll run out of stuff to watch anytime soon. Along with everything else that's been on hold while I've been putting this together, I'm hoping to take in a regional high school production of the Book of Will this weekend, and I really gotta get to Branagh's Death on the Nile at some point, so seriously, let's get this thing recorded and in the feed already. Thank you so much for checking out my video cataloging project. I did put my 9th installment of VideoFuzzy the video together in my Friday night feature and by the numbers segment for this one, and that link is everywhere. You can check out my catalog listing along with audio links at VideoFuzzy.blogspot.com, and for past episodes, add, subscribe, or follow VideoFuzzy everywhere you get your podcasts. Feedback is always appreciated. You can contact me through my blog or podcast sites via email to tjaman1970@yahoo.com or through my VideoFuzzy pages on Facebook or Instagram, or follow me at TJVideoFuzzy on Twitter. For VideoFuzzy, I'm Terry J. Aman. Happy viewing.
It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy.